Welcome to Poland Daily History with me, Nicholas Richardson. The 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month in 1918, Armistice Day for most of Europe, but it had particular significance in Poland because it marked the beginning of the independence of Poland after 123 years of being dominated by other powers following the Third Partition. And to discuss what this meant for Poland and why it happened when it did, I'm delighted to be joined in the studio by Adam Starzyński, our expert in all things historical in Poland. Adam, welcome back.
Thank you for having me.
1918, of course, we remember it in the United Kingdom and other countries as being the end of the Great War, as it came to be known. But for Poland, it was very different.
Poland had been under partitions for 123 years. It had been wiped off the political map of Europe as an independent state by Prussia, Austria, and Russia in 1795. The Poles had tried to rise up on several occasions during the 19th century. There was naturally a great national struggle that started with Napoleon's entry into Poland in the early 19th century. Then we had an uprising, a November uprising in 1830, 1831. We had January uprising in 1863-64 against Russia on both occasions. And there were other smaller also attempts to regain independence, but all of them didn't bear any fruit. And it was with the eruption of the Great War that some people in Poland started thinking that it was possible that this war would somehow lead to national independence. The true visionary here was naturally Józef Piłsudski, who later became the founder of modern Poland. He, very early on in the war, made a prediction about how the war would develop and how it would end. He believed that the Central Powers, that Austria-Hungary and Germany would together defeat the Russian Empire on the Eastern Front, and then in turn be defeated by the Western powers of the Entente, meaning France and Great Britain. He probably didn't expect that the Americans would get involved. He thought the British and the French would be able to do it on their own, but naturally with the entry of the Americans into the war in 1917, if it didn't completely, if it wasn't a completely decisive change to the war, it certainly sped up the process. So by 1918, it was clear that the Germans were about to lose. Even a little bit earlier, the Germans felt that they were in trouble. In 1916, they allowed for the creation of the so-called Regency Council. It was an attempt to bribe the Poles, promising them in some faraway future lofty promises of independence. Naturally in return for the Poles supporting the German war effort and not the Russian war effort. It was decided that a Kingdom of Poland would be created. A Regency Council would lead it with a group of Poles that were agreeing to this deal with the Germans. Zdzisław Lubomirski in the end became the regent, so to say, and was technically the leader of Poland, but in all reality, he was still a marionette of the Germans. There was no real independence there. But nevertheless, with the act of November 5th, 1916, you could say that this was some initial embryo of independence. Piłsudski, in the meanwhile, had decided to create the Polish legions, the Polish military formations, which were fighting together with the Austro-Hungarian army. They were being used against the Russian army. But we should also remember that Polish soldiers, due to the country having been partitioned by three powers, Polish soldiers were very numerous in all three armies, in the German army, in the Austro-Hungarian, and in the Russian. And often on the front lines, you would have Poles being on the opposite side of the trenches. They would be fighting against each other. There are various memories of Poles realizing that they have Poles on the other side of the trenches and starting to shout at each other in Polish. Sometimes these were examples of people saying things such as, "Oh, brother, I'm sorry that I have to shoot at you, but for the sake of Poland, this could be the way that we will regain our independence. So if I need to take a bullet from you, so be it." There were also other examples. For example, there was one case I read about a Polish soldier from the Austro-Hungarian Empire firing at his Russian opponents when all of a sudden he hears Polish from the other side of the trench. And he starts screaming at them, "Oh, Polish brothers on the other side, how are you? How's it going?" And in response, in Russian, he receives, "Sibirski strelci, the Siberian riflemen do not communicate with the enemy," or something along those lines. So there were very different examples of how this fraternal battle in many cases took place. However, Piłsudski, as I mentioned earlier, decided to bet on the right horse. The war started going in the direction he hoped it would be going. But at the same time, the Austro-Hungarians started feeling that maybe he was going slightly too independent. They wanted to rein him in. And it was really the Germans that came with the final request, or demand rather. But it was something that the Austrians were also worried about. They wanted that Piłsudski would swear allegiance to the German emperor, and when he refused, he was interned in Magdeburg, in a quite nice place to be interned in. That has to be said. It was not some very shabby POW camp or anything similar. He brought with him his right-hand man, Kazimierz Soskowski, who later would become the main military commander of Poland during the Second World War in the government in exile. He would only resign in connection with the Warsaw Uprising. But going back to the First World War, Piłsudski and Soskowski, they spent 15 months together in Magdeburg. They were debating on exactly what to do once they got back to Poland, how this process of regaining independence would look like. And as time passed, it started to look increasingly likely. So they were preparing for what would be. Nevertheless, there were also other centers of authority and power in Poland. It wasn't evident at that moment that it would be Piłsudski who would take the reins. But
Adam, the clock in the corner of the studio is blinking at me, so I'm afraid we must bring this program to an end. Thank you. We'll pick it up next time. There we are. I've had to interrupt Adam almost in mid-sentence, but fear not. If you join us next time, as we hope you will, we'll continue the story. In the meantime, thank you for watching Poland Daily History.